Hi folks, Rob Ager here. A few days ago I posted a video illustrating that the Wade Robson and James Safechuck interviews in Leaving Neverland are not continuous stream of thought interviews, but rather that they are a mixture of clips selected from multiple takes filmed on multiple occasions. In this video I'll address the issue of whether the non-verbal communication from Wade and James actually convey genuine, truthful expression, or whether the two are faking their emotions. This is a subject I do have plenty of experience with. I studied tons of psychology throughout my entire life. I worked 17 years in social care in various roles, and in that time I encountered lots of trauma victims and sometimes abusers, so I've seen a lot of intense pain expressed by people before my very eyes, and I've also seen many instances of people playing the victim and faking their pain. You know, people trying to get themselves boosted up the priority list for council housing, or trying to cover for the fact that they've actually been abusive to someone else. And when directing fictional films, I've worked with actors on set and in auditions and seen some pretty impressive faking of trauma in those contexts. I'm not saying I always know when people are faking or being honest, but I am bringing some of these experiences to bear in making this video. I must emphasise here too that when responding in the comments section, please try to stay on topic. This video isn't saying that Jackson was 100% innocent of all allegations. That's a complex issue with many facets. The issue here is whether these two guys come off as credible in their non-verbal communication in the film Leaving Neverland. If you try to dismiss the content of this video with unrelated rants, then all you're doing is showing that you can't deal with the information and opinions and footage expressed in this video. Firstly, I'm going to show you some clips from other videos where people laying claim to sexual abuse are, in my opinion, expressing genuine trauma and speaking truthfully about their experiences. And as unpleasant as they are to watch, I invite you to pay close attention to the non-verbal details such as their voice quality, facial expressions, breathing patterns, head, hand and body movements, the pacing of their dialogue, and so on. After you've watched, I'll offer my take on these clips and then we'll start comparing with the filmed testimony of Wade and James. So here's the clips.
As I walked in, you know, I'm young, so I was kind of like I don't know how to describe it, but it's like I knew that something was not going to be good from this event. But again, like I was like maybe 6 to 9, maybe young, I don't really know really. I could be 6 to 8, 4 to 6, I don't know. But I remember this event and, you know, this individual was doing whatever he was doing and, it's like, okay, he told me to basically give him oral sex. Now, by the time that I was that close, I personally was already crying really bad, and you know, I complied because I didn't know, you know, what to do, you know, in this type of situation or whatever. So I just, you know, did whatever, you know, a young person would do. I don't know what the heck that would be, but I just did that. And really, like I said, you know, this was one of the three. And, you know, one of the things that I vividly remember was hearing this individual say, when the white stuff comes out, just swallow it. Now, getting to that place, I saw that come out, and that's the only time where I ever said no, because I was completely crying. I mean, that's the only time I ever said no in any of these three things.
He picked me up by my hair, opened the passenger back door behind the driver's side, and threw me in the car. And he was swearing at me, telling me, you know, to shut up, in so many words. And at that point, I was just trying to calm him down because I really wanted, you know, to take control of the situation.
You were in a survival mode?
Absolutely. Yeah, once I got hit, you know, a couple times, I immediately said, okay, Amy, this is real, this is happening, and now we need to keep you safe and get you out of the situation somehow and get help.
What happens next?
We sort of went back and forth. I was trying to plead with him. I was saying no and please, and he was just swearing at me, telling me to shut up. And at that point, he pulled his pants down and forced me to give him oral sex. And I was raped in the back of that car for about a half an hour, in different positions. And
I was put into an orphanage. I was abused by clergy. I was shopped around and abused by many different men. They were put there to care for me, to look after me, to help me grow up, not to be their plaything. And that is one of the hardest things to deal with, is learning that it's not my fault. It's their fault.
Yeah, just normal. I'd walk that way a lot of the time because I used to work in the city and I'd walk up that street heaps and probably later at that earlier in the morning, I'd say. So I felt comfortable and everything. Walking up one street, I noticed there was some guy behind me, and I crossed the road to go over my street and noticed he was behind me again. And then, yeah, after that, all I remember is being hit in the side of the head. Me for a really long time. I think I was a new mum. I couldn't be the mum that I wanted to be because I was dealing with this and tried to self-medicate without alcohol. I couldn't sleep. I had insomnia. As much as it damaged me, I think it damaged me and my son's relationship because I was trying to deal with what was happening with me.
I wake up to him putting his hands on me and pulling down my underwear. And he pushes my head down.
You okay?
Yeah.
Tell me what's going on.
The Marine Corps was the first place I truly felt safe. And then that incident happened. And it shattered like everything. And I didn't feel safe in the room. I didn't want to talk about it.
It was a family member. And she was twice my age. I think she was like 16, 17 years old. Amazing Stories was playing, was on a video on TV at the time, and she just looked at me and she said, "Hey, I'm bored. You want to do something?" I said, "Sure, what?" She said, "Let's play a game." I said, "Okay." She laid out some blankets on the floor and took the cushions off the couch, put them on the floor, and she laid me down. And she started to perform. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know how to feel. I just felt weird. I felt naked. I felt vulnerable. And after she was done, she said, I just did you a favor.
The next thing I can clearly remember is he's got his arm and he's holding it across my chest so that I can't even barely breathe. He's holding himself up on his arm, and all I can smell is sickly sweet wild turkey and sweat and I don't know, honestly, if I ever yelled no or if I could even yell anything. I can't remember being even really able to breathe because I felt like I couldn't get even a single. And I can breathe now, but
Before I move on, I'd like to note that the links to the original videos are in the video description below, so you can go and watch them in full. Some of the clips are very short, even in the original videos that I captured them from, while others are much longer, lasting up to half an hour, and sometimes unedited shots that last for as much as 15 minutes. Okay, so on to my assessment of the clips. First, I'll offer basic thoughts on each individual clip, then I'll outline some overall patterns. This lady who was attacked and beaten in the street, while this was a violent abuse case, I've shown you it because there are multiple elements in her expression that are very difficult to act. The bloodshot eyes, increased blood flow to the face, the downpour of tears, the severely quivering chin and lips, and the shaky voice brought about by rapid shallow breathing and increased heart rate. This stuff is mostly involuntary, as in it's very difficult to fake these nonverbal responses. Some of these things can be faked by a decent actor, but to fake all of them at once with this level of intensity is quite difficult. I've never seen a professional actor pull off a depiction of trauma that's as convincing as this. So I'm showing you this as an unmistakable depiction of genuine trauma. Next up, this guy who talks of child sexual abuse against himself and how it has affected his behaviour and has made him feel suicidal. I see no reason to disbelieve this fella. The flow of tears is quite consistent. Though he does pause from time to time while he tries to recompose himself and find the right words, he mostly gives a very rapid succession of descriptions of these past experiences. It's hard to make up so much detail with rapidity like this and to keep that up for a full 14-minute unedited video, which is what he does here. Another detail, both his eyes and his nose are streaming, and I've tended to notice that acted crying comparatively lacks the streaming of the nose. Maybe not always, but it seems to be a pattern that I've picked up on. Next up, this fella is a bit different to the previous one in some ways. He doesn't shed any tears as far as I can tell, but he does talk about having overcome his trauma and is telling the viewer that they can do the same. But still, there are non-verbal signatures of emotional pain. His unedited original video is 36 minutes long, and he's very rapid throughout in his pacing of dialogue, with occasional pauses to try and find the right words or process something that's difficult. And when he does those pauses, he frequently closes his eyes tight shut for a while and covers either his face or forehead with his hand. And his voice is fairly shaky throughout as well. This woman was abducted and raped for several hours, and then her attacker tried to kill her. She had to play dead while she was naked for 15 minutes until he went away. Terrible ordeal. There are two camera angles, but from what I can tell, the cuts back and forth match each other, as in the timeline of the interview isn't broken. She does an amazing job of staying composed in this interview for half an hour. Her eyes don't well up much, though the footage is low quality, so it's hard to tell. But she does a lot of swallowing, which is typically a sign of trying to control anxiety or fight back tears. Her voice trembles a lot when speaking about the most traumatic parts of the memory, and she's very rapid in her descriptions of just about everything that happened. This guy is only shown briefly in the original video as part of a documentary about several men, but I've included it here as another example of expressed emotional pain that's hard to act. This clip is brief, but there are multiple involuntary signatures of real trauma. Whether the events he has described are true, I don't know, but he is in a great deal of emotional pain here. His eyes well up in advance of the full-on crying. His voice trembles, though he sort of hides it behind talking softly. His chin trembles in the lead up to bursting into tears. And though it's difficult to notice because of the fat in his neck, he appears to do a fair bit of the swallowing that forms part of the attempt to choke back the tears, as they say. He covers his eyes and forehead with his hand, and his body shakes intensely from within as he tries and fails to hold back the crying. And we can hear his nose is streaming as well as his eyes. This guy is shown only briefly in the original video, but there's enough information here. He's more angry than the others, as is evident in his tensed jaw and wide eyes, but beneath that the emotional pain is detectable. The tears, the tremor in the voice, the swallowing or choking back of tears, and in contrast to some of the others who cover their eyes or forehead with one hand, this guy covers his chin in a way that doesn't look particularly comfortable. I suspect that his chin and lip are trembling and he's masking it with his hand. He also shakes his head in disapproval, which a couple of the other guys do from time to time as well. I don't know if that's a desire to reject the memory, say no to the abuser, or some moral disapproval of what's happened, but it's there. Interestingly, only the men in these clips seem to do this head-shaking thing. And lastly, this victim of rape in a military service context. I included her because she's a bit different to the others in some overt ways. She's much slower in her dialogue, often searching for the right words, or she's in conflict about what she does and doesn't want to tell us. She also shifts her head around a lot, maybe trying to hide her pain from the camera. The tears are slow to come, but they eventually do, and in particular she appears to be in the most pain when she talks about her accuser suggesting that she brought about the sexual encounter herself. I've noticed this with a lot of trauma and abuse victims when they express feelings of guilt. The thought that they somehow brought about the abuse themselves, that thought devastates them. Remember this guy? His breakdown occurs right after he says that the abuse wasn't his own fault, it was their fault. But the sudden breakdown suggests that he still partially feels responsible for his own abuse. It's an important point because kids, being hungry for new experiences and personal development, often can easily be groomed into sexual encounters by paedophiles. Then of course the kid feels responsible for what happened. I think this is where the suicidal thought element comes into play for a lot of people. Self-loathing is a powerful motivating force in many suicides. Okay, before we move on and look at Wade and James's nonverbal communication, here's a list of some indicators that are frequently present in real trauma victims, and most of them are present in several of the abuse victim footage that we've looked at. Some of these are more frequent than others, and they vary in intensity depending on the person and what they've experienced. Almost all of them can be acted by some people, but a key factor is that when someone tries to fake these things, they're having to do it consciously, and so they can only fake a small number of these indicators at any given point in their performance. But just to show you how good some people can be at faking emotional trauma, take a look at these clips. Remember the movie E.T.? Here's the lead actor, who is a kid, making the tears stream, and he's damn good at it.
Well, I'm afraid I have to, son.
Can't take him away, he's mine!
But it's not my choice. The president asked me to come here and get him.
I don't care what the president says, he's my best friend! And you can't take him away!
Well, it's real possible, Elliot, that he'll come back.
Incredibly convincing. Or how about Haley Joel Osment's performance in the movie AI?
No, Mommy, please, no, please, no,
They would
Mommy,
destroy
no.
you, David.
No,
They
Mommy,
were
Mommy, no. I'm sorry I broke myself. I'm so sorry I cut your hair off. And I'm sorry I hurt you. And
No,
Mark,
no,
and
I have
and
to
Anthony.
go. I have
No.
to go. Stop it!
Sorry.
No.
Mommy, if Pinocchio became a real boy and I become a real boy, can I come home? That's just a story. It's a story.
Now intellectually I know this is acting, but still every time I've watched this scene I feel close to tears myself. That's the power of good acting. Even if you know it's fake, your hardwired instinct is to empathise, unless you're a psychopath. One more factor before we look at Leaving Neverland. In many of these abuse traumas, the victim displays rapidly conflicting nonverbal communication, and by that I mean multiple changes in just a few seconds. There can be rapid interchange between anger and sadness, like with this guy. Some will try and mask over their pain with smiles and bits of laughing, like these two. Very few actors can pull that stuff off, but Toni Collette in the movie Hereditary, she does a great job of doing that. So, Leaving Neverland. Before we compare all that stuff with Robson and Safechuck themselves, there's a portion of Leaving Neverland that in itself shows up their performances as likely being acted. Wade's brother and sister look genuinely upset about their mother splitting their family and taking her kids to go off and try and live the high life with Michael Jackson, abandoning the husband. We later learn that their father killed himself, and look at the convincing non-verbals from his siblings as they talk about the family breakup.
I remember my dad just saying, "Please don't leave," to me. And he just said, "Please don't go, stay with me." And I remember I saying, "Dad, just don't ask me that. Like, Dad, don't make me choose." Like,
my grandmother, my mom's mom, like standing at the window, she was just like moaning and crying. Yeah, I guess that was really like the end of the family. Okay.
Even Wade himself manages for once in this film to look upset here. Some tears and a streaming nose. This is probably genuine because if he was able to act this good, then why not act it the same way when talking about the abuse as well? I think this is real stuff here. It's the one moment in the whole movie where I really felt empathy, like what I was watching was real. And these family trauma clips dispel the excuse that those who are determined to see abuse without evidence have put forth in response to my video about the multiple takes issue. Some responders surmised that maybe there were much more painful takes of Wade and James's interviews and that for the sake of dignity they were left out of the final edit. Oh really? Then why does the film dwell on the genuine expression of past trauma from these two, this shot lingering on him soaking up the tears? And isn't it interesting that this is timed in the edit so that it happens toward the end of the 2-hour first half of Leaving Neverland, thus leaving the impression of genuine trauma in the viewer's mind? Is our empathy here supposed to transfer over to the deadpan allegations of Wade and James? And even the footage of Gavin Arvizo's claim of molestation, which are briefly shown 53 minutes into part 2 of Leaving Neverland, his allegation severely lacks the convincing non-verbals of real abuse victims.
He started masturbating me.
Okay.
And after a while, I told him I didn't want to do that.
Did he stop?
I told him and he kept on doing it. I told him he kept on saying that he wants to teach me.
When it comes to Wade and James in the film, the non-verbal patterns from them I noticed are far less convincing than their own family members within the same film. Hardly any of the items on this list are present in their non-verbal expression, despite the film being 4 hours long, and with probably 90 minutes of that runtime composing of shots of these two talking about their experiences, and despite the use of insistent close-ups that are designed to make the minutiae of their expressions register upon us. I've gone through the film with a fine-tooth comb trying to find occurrences of these kinds of non-verbal cues, and came up with hardly any examples to show you. First, I'll show you what for me is the most convincing expression of upset from either man in the entire film, just in case anyone is thinking of accusing me of selective editing. Here's the clip.
I remember Amanda was on my left, and I remember physically she just caved in. Like someone punched her in the chest. And my brother sort of had the opposite physical reaction, like his chest kind of puffed out, like he got angry. I think his first word was, "What?" There's real kind of like anger in his eyes.
It's like the world was kind of like spinning, and all I could...
Now this is a little bit of a complex one to figure out. He's not talking about the actual abuse. He's talking about the abuse and how his brother got angry. And then we cut away from his explanation. We don't get to find out what his brother was angry about and exactly what he did next. Did the brother fly off the handle about Wade lying all those years that he wasn't abused? Now, I do think Wade is really genuinely upset here, but what it is that he's actually upset about, I don't know. Is he upset because of the pain he put his siblings through with his sudden claim of abuse? The pain he caused them with his so-called confession would trigger guilt in him, even if the claim was false, maybe even more so. I would like to see the makers of the film release the unedited portion of interview used here so that we can see the build-up and what Wade says afterward about his brother's anger. And don't forget, because of the multiple takes issue, there was plenty of chance on set to work on Wade's performance and get the best crying shot that he could manage. If it's genuine, then this would have to be a first take deal as well, because any follow-up takes would likely lack the same intense emotion. But absolutely key in all this, if his confessions to his siblings was the truth, then why didn't Wade show these kinds of halfway convincing non-verbals at other points in the film regarding his supposed abuse? He manages a little bit at one point, but not nearly as intense. Take a look for yourself.
And started touching my penis underneath my pants, and You know, there was nothing aggressive about it, nothing abrasive. I never felt scared or anything like that. Pulling my pants and my underwear down, pulling them off. And going down and starting to, you know, perform oral sex on me. You know, with his mouth on my, you know, 7-year-old penis. You know, quickly it turned into having me perform oral sex on him too. Low. And have me go to the far corner of the bed and be on all fours. And have me sort of just bend over my knees, you know. So he could look at my anus while he was masturbating. Periodically through that, he would kind of come up and stick his tongue in my anus. Ejaculation in the mouth, on the face, all, you know, all that stuff, full graphic. I remember that affecting me internally, yeah, even more than the photographic porn. I remember that feeling in my stomach being really heavy, like a nervousness. But I was 7, you know. Michael tried to penetrate me in my anus with his penis. You know, trying for a while, and I guess was able to a bit, but it was really painful and too painful for me. So he stopped. I didn't believe or understand that the sexual stuff that happened between Michael and I was abuse.
Yeah, in his 20s. As for James Safechuck, he never manages to look genuinely upset in this film, and I cannot believe that people actually think that he's convincing.
In Paris, he introduced me to masturbation, and that's how it started. And I remember my penis swelling up because I did it so much that first time. I must have done it a few times. Michael would like it if you would bend over and like spread open your cheeks. That's what he liked. And then he would masturbate. And I woke up and Michael said that he had performed oral sex on me while I was sleeping. And I was like, oh, okay. It sounds sick, but it's kind of like when you're first dating somebody, right? You do a lot of it. So it was very much like that. Like he wanted to do some anal. He put his finger inside me and I didn't like it at all. So he kind of backed off on that. I think I was just like kind of wincing, and I was asking him not to do it, but he did it and he said, oh, you'll like it. You have these symptoms and then you find out that somebody else has them and then they went through something that you went through. I really just wanted to talk to Wade because you feel so alone. I told my wife after Wade came out, maybe a few weeks after. Telling her was like no going back.
Both of these guys deliver nearly all of their dialogue in a slow, monotone manner, pausing excessively between words and sentences as if they're looking for the right words, and doing these pensive stares into empty space, all of which can easily be acted. And yet, as I established in my previous video on the subject, multiple takes of their dialogue were filmed, So surely after the first take of a given chunk of dialogue, the words would flow more readily in the following takes. But this doesn't happen, and it's another indication to me that these guys are being directed to act the way they do, rather than just being asked questions and allowed to respond naturally. By the way, there are some people who have experienced sexual abuse as kids and have dealt with it so well emotionally that they can candidly discuss it as if it's not that big a deal. It's actually a myth that people always have to be psychologically messed up for the rest of their lives by sexual abuse. But with these guys, the delivery of dialogue is so slow that to me they come off as if they're a bit stoned, especially Safechuck, who acts like a docile child who's only half aware of what's going on around him. I guess that does pull on some people's heartstrings though, but for me it's too consistent, too flatlined. He virtually never veers away from that manner of expression. It's like a trance. I was almost falling asleep and half expecting him to start swinging a hypnotist's watch back and forth. And his overly polite and innocent vocal delivery, in my opinion, mismatches the fact that he filed a lawsuit against the Jackson companies. Where is his anger in this film if he wants justice? Again and again he gives little full-stop smirks and half-hearted laughs at the ends of sentences, and it happens whether he's talking about sexual abuse or something casual that's no big deal.
It's all a big seduction. So do I blame them? I'm still working on it.
Yeah, well, you really genuinely don't look like you're working on it. The ultra-slow, soft delivery of almost all their lines in the film strikes me as an unsophisticated effort to make them appear emotionally traumatised. Here's Wade talking at about triple the pace he does in Leaving Neverland, and he very comfortably denies any abuse.
That Michael was holding sort of all over the world doing his tour, and it was like a dancer-like contest like him.
Right.
I won that, and then the prize
and then
was
you
to
moved
meet
into the ranch.
Easy, Dean. Easy.
No, he's not moving to the ranch. Are you still friendly with Michael?
Yeah, we still talk every couple months, catch up.
You do, really?
Yeah.
Well, what's he like?
What's he like? He's a good guy.
He's a good guy?
Yeah.
Show me where he touched you. You never, nothing
Same
ever,
place he touched you.
nothing ever like that? No nonsense, no shenanigans? But he's a weird guy, you have to admit, right?
You know what, at the end of the day, it's like, everybody's got something weird about him. Everybody's got something strange about him.
Yeah, but some people more than others.
Yeah, but true. At the end of the day, all I'm here, it's like, you know, you may not like him, you may have weird thoughts about him.
At the end of the day.
Why don't you let me talk for a minute? No.
I don't see any hesitance, any contradictory body language or contradictory expressions there. He just seems totally comfortable in denying that he was abused. Whether they're talking about their career, their family, or Jackson performing sexual acts upon them, these two guys' posture virtually never changes, but the real abuse victims I've shown, they shift around a lot, especially when they're uncomfortable with certain aspects of what they're talking about. These two guys are way too relaxed. Oh, Safechuck's legs do cross from one side to the other from time to time. Wow. In most of the genuine victim abuse clips that I've shown you, the victims have moments where they are displaying as many as half a dozen of these forms of expression at the same time. But this only happens in Leaving Neverland, when there's discussion about Wade's family breaking up and his father dying. It doesn't really happen much anywhere else at all. So I don't buy their performances here, and that's without even considering all the other discrepancies in their story that have so far come to light. But we're not done yet. Here's something that I've separated from the other non-verbal communication patterns because it's something most of you won't be familiar with and it'll need a bit of explaining. Have you ever noticed how when people are deep in thought or are asked to answer questions, they will move their eyes in certain directions as they process information? It's called eye accessing cues, and there are patterns built into it that can, in certain circumstances, be quite revealing of what's going on in a person's mind. Have a quick look again at these clips of real abuse victims and notice what they're doing frequently with their eyes. They're moving their eyes mostly to their left and upper left, not our left, theirs. Most people's brains are hardwired so that when they access the sensory details of memories, their eyes move to their mid and upper left. Straight left is for recall of remembered sounds, and upper left is for recall of remembered visuals. And those cues are mirrored on our right side for constructed experiences. Ask someone to imagine sights and sounds that don't match their memories, and their eyes will tend to move upright for visual and straight right for sounds. There's other complications to this regarding the low directional eye movements which are related to emotional states and to processing of language. But the important thing is that eye movements during mental processing can be used to identify when a person is thinking about actual memories versus imagined experiences. With the exception of this guy, these abuse victims' eye accessing cues are dominated by left and upper left movements as they recall the details of their past traumas. Now, I don't know how much truth there is in this fella's claims, the guy whose eyes move to his upper right. His emotional pain is almost certainly real though. He could be one of the very small number of people among the population whose brains are hardwired the opposite way round in terms of eye accessing cues. Apparently it's about 5% of people. Also, before he started crying, he was talking about who is to blame for his abuse experiences, and that could have involved him imagining something like the police arresting the perpetrators, hence his visual imagination in the way his eyes moved. Now, a lot of people are a bit freaked by eye accessing cues when they first hear about it because it's something that's been happening in their conversations with people all their lives, and they never noticed it. So if you think I'm making this stuff up, then go and give this a try. Ask a bunch of people to remember something visually specific, like what clothes they wore the day before yesterday, and notice how most people's eyes will move up and to their left before they answer your question. And don't tell them that you're observing their eye movements in advance, because they'll then become conscious of it and it'll mess up a little bit. Then ask the same people to imagine something visual like, how high do you think an elephant would be able to jump if it was stood on the moon in a breathable atmosphere? And watch most of them move their eyes up to the right. But as you can see in these clips, the left eye cues for memory access is clearly there, suggesting strongly that these people are talking about their memories and not making the whole thing up. Alright, so you can see where this is going, can't you? In Leaving Neverland, James's eye access cues are dominated by movements to his upper right. Unless he is one of those rare people who has his brain hardwired the other way round in terms of eye accessing, then this suggests that he's making up a lot of his story. And for me, that matches with the general lack of involuntary indicators of genuine emotional trauma. When it comes to Wade, the eye accessing cues are quite a bit more strange. Most of his cues in this film are to the right. And from what I can tell, he doesn't do a great deal of visual accessing either way. So I've watched several of his interviews, and when he's asked questions on these subjects, most of the time his eyes move to his lower left. But lower left isn't a memory cue. Lower left movements are for processing of language. So if he's already revised what verbal answers he's going to give, then that might explain his eye movements. Some people are intensely visual in their thought process, and it shows in their eye movements. Some people, like this woman, are more physical sensation orientated, and they tend to have wider, bulkier faces. And some people are strongly verbal in their thought process. They think mostly in words at the conscious level. And Robson strikes me as primarily being a verbal processor. He's got the generally pensive look that tends to go with that kind of thinking. So in terms of eye accessing cues, I find Robson much harder to read. There's certainly a major lack of left eye cues in his Leaving Neverland interviews, which is conflicted by a mixed bag of eye cues in other interviews that he's done. Even in interviews when he was a kid, his eye movements were weird. It's not always a reliable system though. In general conversation, people's eyes frequently bounce around all the sensory systems as their mind quickly recovers snippets of memories, imagines odd little things, accesses emotions, or conjures up internal dialogue. Each person has their own internal habits of sensory processing, and those patterns can vary a great deal between different people. But I found it an interesting facet of the Robson and Safechuck interviews, and I've put it in here as an additional point for you guys to consider. It is not the main point of this video. The main point is the stuff, the comparisons between their interviews in Leaving Neverland and the interviews with real abuse victims, which we've already gone over. Who knows, maybe Robson was abused and Safechuck wasn't. I'm not hearing people talk about that theory. Maybe Jackson was inappropriately affectionate, but these guys have maliciously embellished the story with sordid details that didn't actually happen, in which case they would be combining real memories with false ones. There are lots of possibilities regarding this case, but one thing I will say is that whether the allegations of these guys are true or not, I have very little respect for either of them and consider them to be extremely unreliable witnesses. If they were abused, then they should have come out about it in 2003 when they were adults and Jackson was facing trial again. They were adults, so to deliberately lie in court to cover up a paedophile's activities or to merely say nothing, in my view, amounts to a punishable crime. At the same time, if they weren't abused, then their current allegations are truly despicable. Either way, I don't trust them. And to any idiots out there who claim that those who question these two guys are being disrespectful to victims of abuse, you are aware, aren't you, that some people do lie about abuse? It does happen. And the argument can certainly be made that these guys, if they are faking or exaggerating their sexual experiences at the hands of Michael Jackson, are committing the ultimate insult against real victims of abuse, like the ones I've shown you clips of in this video. Last thing, I stumbled across this body language expert video in which this lady claims that Robson is telling the truth, but the things she points out don't indicate that he's telling the truth. They indicate that he's anxious, and anxiety is something he would feel even if he was lying on TV. So that doesn't prove a thing. Plus, her assessment here is contradicted by Robson's very confident and congruent performance here, claiming that he was never abused. But hey, some of you might find her arguments more convincing than mine, so, go and give it a watch. Feel free to comment. Have you noticed things that I haven't? Do you think I've chosen the wrong abuse victim clips to compare with Leaving Neverland? And if so, why? Can you find other noteworthy abuse victim clips for consideration? And having watched this entire video, how do you feel about Wade and Safechuck's accusations now? Do they seem more or less convincing to you? Let me know. If you want to see more of my videos and articles on film analysis and psychology, then go and check out my items on my website at collativelearning.com, and of course subscribe and check out the rest of my videos. This is Rob Ager signing off. Bye for now.